Hello, and welcome to Understanding English Language Learner Policy. My name is Natalie Menino, a Senior ELL Compliance and Performance Specialist at the Brooklyn North Borough Citywide Office. This session was created in collaboration with my colleague and fellow Senior ELL Compliance and Performance Specialist Tatiana Ulubabova. This webinar was created specifically for parents of English language learners to inform them of the mandated services English language learners should receive. Let's begin. This session will focus on the following. We will spend the majority of the session on ELL identification. This includes the completion of the Home Language Identification Survey and the individual interview, the nice-to-tell administration if the student is determined to be eligible, written notification of the student's ELL identification status, the parent orientation, and the student's placement into an ELL program. We will also go into the New York State English as a Second Language Achievement Test, also known as the NYSESLAT, ways the school can keep parents informed, and additional resources. Let's begin. Here we have our objective for today's session. Participants will become familiar with opportunities for services regarding the education of English language learners. We will begin with the information parents will see upon their entry into a New York City school or DOE facility. As parents enter a New York City DOE school or facility, they will immediately notice the Language ID Guide and Multilingual Welcome poster. Translation services in a parent's preferred language are provided to each parent. Translation services are provided by staff at the New York City DOE facility or over the phone through the New York City DOE Translation and Interpretation Unit. Here are additional resources that parents will find at the Welcome Centers and at New York City DOE schools. These resources are the Parent's Guide to Language Access brochures and I Speak cards. These will help staff at a New York City DOE facility identify the languages that the parents prefer to communicate in. Let's begin with who are our English language learners. Our English language learners are students that have a home language other than English and score below the commanding proficiency level on the New York State Identification Test for English language learners, also known as the NYSETL. Now let's begin with the ELL identification process. Families of students that are new to the New York State public school system must go through an English language learner identification process. Translation services should be provided for parents during this process. If a staff member at the school is not available in the parent's preferred language to translate, the Language and Translation Unit can be called in by the school for over-the-phone translation services. This process consists of completing a Home Language Identification Survey, or HLIS, in the parent's preferred language and an individual interview. The NYSETL is also administered if needed. Written notification of the student's ELL identification status is sent to parents. Parent orientation, which includes an explanation of the 3 models available to English language learners, is offered if the student is eligible for ELL services, and finally, student placement into an ELL program. Now we will take a closer look at each of the items just mentioned. The first is the Home Language Identification Survey, or HLIS, and the individual interview. The purpose of the HLIS is to determine the home language of the student. This survey will ask basic questions like what language does the child read and write? What language does the child understand? By using the responses to these questions and the results of the individual interview, the teacher conducting the process will determine the student's home language. The HLIS is available in 10 languages. For low incidence languages, the Translation and Interpretation Unit is called to make sure this process is completed in the parent's preferred language. Next, we will look at the administration of the New York State Identification Test for English Language Learners, or NYSETL. If the student has a home language that is other than English, the teacher will determine if the student should be tested for language acquisition services. This decision is made by interpreting the results of a grade level assessment administered to the student. If it's determined that the student should take the NYSETL is administered and the student will receive a score of either entering, emerging, transitioning, expanding, or commanding. If the student scores entering, emerging, transitioning, or expanding, the student will receive ELL mandated services. If the student scores commanding, the student will not receive ELL mandated services. If the student is entering the New York State public school system for the first time in grades K to 12 and has an IEP from another state, from a private school in New York State, or from an early childhood facility, the language proficiency team will determine if the student should be tested for language acquisition services. Mandated ELL services consist of the number of minutes students are instructed by a licensed ELL teacher. There are two types of mandated minutes. The first type is standalone. This means the student will receive instruction from a licensed ELL teacher only. The second type is integrated ELL/content area. These minutes are provided either by one teacher that is licensed in both ELL and a content area, or by one teacher licensed ELL and another teacher licensed in a content area. If it is the latter, the teachers will be providing instruction collaboratively in the same classroom. The number of mandated ELL minutes and type of minutes English language learners receive are determined by their proficiency level. For example, a student that is entering in grades K to 8 will receive a total of 360 minutes of service weekly. 180 minutes will be standalone and 180 minutes will be integrated ELL/ELA. Each proficiency level must receive a certain amount of total minutes weekly and a certain amount of minutes within each type. Once the NICETEL is administered, parents must receive written notification of the results in their preferred language within 5 school days. Parents will receive an entitlement letter if the students are entitled to receive mandated ELL services, or they will receive a non-entitlement letter if they are not entitled to receive mandated ELL services. Once the parent is informed of the student's status as an English language learner, they will receive an invitation to a parent orientation. The purpose of this parent orientation is to introduce parents to the 3 program models available for English language learners. These models are English as a New Language, or ENL, Transitional Bilingual Education, or TBE, and Dual Language, or DL. Parents will watch a video that explains the goals, the allocation of language during each of the program models, and instructional expectations. The default placement is bilingual if a program is available in the student's home language. At the end of the parent orientation, parents will be asked to complete an ELL parent survey and program agreement form indicating the program they agreed to place their child into. Parents also have the option to an ELL transfer if the current school does not have the program model the parent agrees to place the student into. If an ELL transfer is pursued, the current school must service the student in the program model that is available at the school. There are 2 types of bilingual programs offered by New York City. These programs are Transitional Bilingual Education, or TBE, and Dual Language, or DL. These programs differ in both goals of the program and student population. Students placed in a bilingual program will receive the services mentioned previously, plus content areas offered bilingually. Let's begin with Transitional Bilingual Education, or TBE. The goal of a TBE program is English proficiency. The premise of this program is the student's skills in the home language will transfer to the new language. The student composition in a TBE program is all English language learners. Instruction is primarily in the home language in the beginning, with the transition into English over time. Next, we will look at Dual Language, or DL. The goal of a dual language program is biliteracy and bilingualism. The students will be able to read, write, speak, and listen in both the home language and the target language equally. The student composition is both ELLs and English proficient students. The ELLs are language role models for the English proficient students, and the English proficient students are language role models for the ELLs. The New York State English as a Second Language Achievement Test, or NICESLAT, is a yearly multi-part exam that measures the student's growth in reading, writing, listening, and speaking in English. This exam is administered in the spring and provides a pathway for students to exit ELL services. A student can exit mandated ELL services by scoring commanding on the NICESLAT. A student in grades K to 8 can also exit ELL services by scoring a 3 or 4 on the standardized ELA assessment and expanding on the NICESLAT within the same school year. A student in grades 9 to 12 can exit ELL services by scoring a 65 on the ELA regions and scoring expanding on the NICESLAT within the same school year. Students that exit the program will still receive 90 minutes weekly of instructional support and testing accommodations for an additional 2 years after exiting ELL services. Schools utilize many strategies and structures to keep parents informed. The first is one we have already mentioned. This is the parent orientation meeting. During this meeting, parents will be provided with the parent brochure, school expectations, information on next generation learning standards, and more. The next is a mandated annual parent meeting. This is required to take place between the school and the parents of all English language learners to discuss the progress of the student, areas of strength, and areas of enhancement. The next is all school communication is expected to be sent to parents in their preferred language. Next are two major points of contact for parents in their children's schools. These 2 points of contact are the parent coordinator and the language access coordinator. Parents can reach out to these 2 staff members for any questions that they have or to receive the latest updated school information. Families that have enrolled their children into the New York City DOE public school system for the first time and have opted into remote learning as their learning preference have the option to complete the provisional ELL identification process virtually. It's important to note that provisional ELL identification is temporary and must be fully completed upon the student's return to in-person learning. This includes the formal completion of the HLIS, including parent signatures and the administration of the NICETEL. Provisional ELL identification includes the following: determination of a provisional home language, completion of the NICETEL waiver, and completion of the parent orientation. Here we have additional resources that can help support families with helping their children. At the first link, parents will find translated guides to Google Classroom. At the second link, parents will find various websites that discuss instructional strategies that can be used with their children. At the third link, parents will find additional information about the 3 program models we discussed earlier. Thank you for watching this webinar. If you have any questions, please contact us by completing the survey on the slide. You can also access the survey through the link in the description. We hope that this webinar was helpful in introducing you to the support and resources provided by your child's school as well as the ELL identification process.